And I remember at 5 a.m.
Some people have just finished praying.
That's when they started firing live ammo.
People start falling down.
It's like the things that we used to watch in films.
والله ولدها اقسم بالله والله تراب بس والله تراب بس قتلناهم تراب بس الله اكبر والله الله اكبر والله تراب بس واقعين اقسم.
هات الدوشكا هات بومبانك نشن واقتل ناس اخوانك دي اوامر سيدك وحرام نسيانك ونسيت الرب الخلق السيد الخان سودانك. هات الدوشكا هات بومبانك نشن واقتل ناس اخوانك دي اوامر سيدك وحرام نسيانك ونسيت الرب الخلق السيد الخان سودانك.
You ever see a dream just turn into a total nightmare overnight? Well, that's pretty much what happened in Sudan in April 2023. A vicious power struggle between two generals who were once allies plunged the entire nation into a catastrophic civil war. So how did a revolution built on so much hope get so completely betrayed, pushing a nation to the absolute brink of collapse? Well, let's get into it.
I mean, it really was a shock to the world. These two men had seized power together, standing side by side. But then, suddenly, in the capital, Khartoum, they became sworn enemies, and the city streets turned into their personal battlefield. It was sudden, it was brutal, and it just completely shattered this fragile peace.
And that right there is the million-dollar question. You have to understand, this wasn't just some political disagreement that got out of hand. Oh no. This was a violent split with roots that go back decades, tangled up in vast economic empires and one dictator's deadly strategy to hold on to power.
Okay, so let's start with the two men right at the heart of all this. They were once partners in crime, partners in a coup. Now they're locked in a deadly fight that has swallowed their entire country. So on that day, the capital city of Khartoum just explodes in gunfire. The fight was between Sudan's official military, the Sudanese Armed Forces, we'll call them the SAF, and a very powerful paramilitary group, the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Now, each side pointed the finger at the other for firing the first shot, but honestly, this thing had been simmering under the surface for a very, very long time. And this is where things get really interesting, because you have to look at their shared history. On one side, you've got General al-Burhan. He's the head of the regular army, the SAF, and he's the country's de facto president. On the other side is General Dagalo, but everyone just calls him Hemedti. He's the charismatic but absolutely ruthless leader of that paramilitary RSF. And here's the key. Just 2 years earlier, these guys weren't enemies. They were partners who together staged a military coup.
But to really get why they turned on each other, we have to go back in time. We need to look at the regime of the dictator they both used to serve, Omar al-Bashir. Because really, he's the architect of this whole mess.
You know, Sudan's modern history has just been so turbulent. Ever since it became independent in 1956, the country has been trapped in this awful cycle of civil wars and military takeovers. I mean, think about it. At least 17 attempted coups. It's a history that's created some deep, deep wounds and really empowered strongmen.
And this is where Hemedti's powerful RSF comes from. Its roots are in this group, the Janjaweed. Back in the early 2000s, President al-Bashir basically unleashed this militia in Darfur to just brutally crush rebellions. They became infamous and were accused of genocide and horrible crimes against humanity. And Hemedti, he was one of their top commanders. So here's the crucial move. See, al-Bashir was incredibly paranoid about his own army, the SAF, turning against him. So what was his solution? It's a classic divide and conquer move. In 2013, he took that Janjaweed militia and made them official, renaming them the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. He created a parallel security force that answered only to him, not the army. He deliberately built a rival to the army to keep them both off balance, which he thought would keep him in power.
And here's the kicker. He didn't just give them guns, he made them rich, incredibly rich. He basically handed both the army and the RSF the keys to huge parts of Sudan's economy. The SAF turned into this corporate juggernaut with around 200 companies in everything from defense to agriculture. The RSF, with Hemedti in charge, took over Sudan's super profitable gold trade. So they weren't just soldiers anymore. They were basically CEOs of rival corporate empires, all built on the country's wealth.
But you know, a corrupt system like that can only last for so long.
And in 2019, this massive wave of hope just swept across the nation, and it threatened to bring the whole thing crashing down.
هات الدوسكة هات بومبانك نشن واقتل ناس أخوانك دي أوامر سيدك وحرام عصيانك ونسيت الرب خلق السيد الخان سودانك نشن واقتل ناس أخوانك دي أوامر سيدك وحرام عصيانك.
I mean, after months of these relentless, incredible nationwide protests, the people of Sudan, with women and young people leading the charge, did what many thought was impossible. They actually toppled a dictator who'd been in power for 3 decades. You could just feel the optimism in the air for a democratic, civilian-led future.
But just look at how fast that hope completely fell apart. So a transitional government gets formed with civilians and the military sharing power. But then, in October 2021, al-Burhan and Hemedti, the very 2 generals we're talking about, team up. They stage their joint coup, and just like that, the democratic dream is shattered. A year and a half later, those same partners turn their guns on each other.
So the big question is why? Why do it? Why betray an entire revolution and just snatch power for yourselves? Well, as it so often does, it comes down to power and, of course, money.
See, that new civilian government wasn't just talking a big game about democracy. It was actually doing something. It set up an anti-corruption committee that started digging into the military's massive business empires. They were making moves to take back those 200 SAF companies and the RSF's gold mines for the state. For the generals, this was a direct threat to everything they'd built. The 2021 coup was their violent way of protecting their fortunes.
And protecting that wealth, well, it was about more than just a coup. It was about controlling the whole country. And that's really what this war is, a brutal fight on multiple fronts, for territory, for resources, and, believe it or not, for the truth itself.
So, on the ground, this map really shows you a country that's been torn in half. The RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, have locked down their heartland out west in Darfur, plus big chunks of the south and the capital. Meanwhile, the SAF, the regular army, is holding the north and the east, including the super important Port Sudan and the Red Sea. Meanwhile, there's a whole other war happening online. Both sides are desperately trying to spin the story their way. The army, the SAF, uses the hashtag #BattleForDignity, trying to look like the protectors of the state. The RSF, and this is just deeply ironic, they use #BattleForDemocracy, trying to steal the language of the very revolution they helped destroy. And Hemedti's RSF in particular has this incredibly slick social media operation that they've been building for years.
And this isn't just hashtags and posts. This propaganda has devastating life or death consequences. For regular people trapped in the fighting, social media could be a lifeline, right? A way to find a safe route out or find help. But as this report shows, both sides use it as a weapon, deliberately posting lies to lure people into ambushes. Imagine you're trying to escape. You look online for a safe route, only to find out it was a lie, a trap. This isn't just a war of words. It's a tactic that puts millions of lives at risk.
So you have this toxic mix of brutal fighting on the ground, a collapsing economy, and a deadly online propaganda war. And it has basically pushed Sudan right to the very edge of becoming a failed state, with a human cost that is it's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
When you look at the human cost, the numbers are they're staggering. It's estimated that around 150,000 people have been killed in just over a year. And we have to remember, this is almost certainly a huge undercount of the real number.
And then there's this. Over 12 million people have been forced to flee their homes. Let that sink in for a second. Right now, it is the largest displacement crisis on Earth. A quarter of Sudan's entire population just forced to run for their lives. And what's worse, this fire is being actively fueled by outside powers. You've got the United Arab Emirates, a key backer of the RSF, with big interests in the gold trade. Neighboring Egypt supports the army, the SAF, because they're desperate for stability on their border. Russia's Wagner Group has been working with the RSF also to get at that gold. And in a really bizarre twist, both Iran and even Ukraine have reportedly been supplying drones to the army, turning Sudan into yet another proxy battlefield for other countries' rivalries. And so, that's where we're left. A devastating war, not about ideas, but about pure power and greed between 2 generals. It's a conflict born from a dictator's paranoid playbook, fueled by personal ambition and now fanned by a dozen foreign interests. The incredible hope of that 2019 revolution, it feels like a lifetime ago now, leaving the future of 45 million people just hanging by a thread.